Hello, greetings to you, and thank you for joining me today. We will be continuing on our basic Heilkunst series, and a mix of the frequently asked questions, the FAQs, as well, of course, any new questions you put forward. And as always, on that note, you can, wherever you're watching, you can just add your question or your comment, right into the comment box. And if you're here with me live, I will be able to answer you immediately, or otherwise, I will get your comment after the fact, and then I will reply in a future video or I'll reply in an appropriate format. But today's question that we want to start off with is no, it'll sound like a bit of a technical question, but don't worry, I'll break it down. The difference between what we call tonic disease and pathic disease. Now, as I say, I will break that distinction down, but the simple definition, the overview way of saying it, is we're really looking at the difference between the root of the disease itself compared to the expression of the disease. Now, it may sound like, well, that sounds like hair splitting, or what's the big deal anyways? Can't you just get rid of the problem? Sure, of course, we want to get rid of the problem. We want to remove any blockage in someone's health and get them back to their natural state of health. But this hair splitting is actually quite significant because it makes a big difference in how effective our treatment will be, right? If you don't have a clear concept of what you're dealing with, well, you can't help but to either be incomplete or to make a mess at some level. This is true of anything in life, right? An inaccurate or an incomplete diagnosis gets to an incomplete solution, or a wrong solution, or even worse, a harmful solution. So back to our technical words, tonic and pathic. You'll probably immediately already recognize the word pathic as being one of the components of the word homeopathic. So there's the pathic part. The tonic is, or so with that word homeopathic now, within this hair splitting, we can talk about a homeopathic remedy. Of course, that term is very widely used, very widely known. We go to the health food store and there's a shelf of homeopathic remedies. Okay, very lovely. But what's this other side? So this where the pathic is this this kind of the expression of the disease, the symptom picture. How does the patient experience their own suffering? I have a pain in my elbow, I have this symptom, I have that symptom. That's the whole pathic side, and that's where we look for the homeopathic remedy. But the other side, this other word I'm using called tonic, we could bring it to the other word, which is very little known, but I think it deserves to be a lot more known, and that's the homotonic. So homotonic, homeopathic. They're related under the same underlying principle of the law of similars, or like cures like. We're still dealing in that same principle, but we're just dealing with two different sides of that: homotonic, homeopathic. And let's actually something that where people have confusion on this. They think that this is something that the whole Heilkunst movement just simply dreamed up. It's like, oh, we want to make up our own thing or whatever. Well, no, we can go all the way back into Dr. Hahnemann's original writings, and he was talking about these same concepts. He didn't use those exact words. Well, he used the word homeopathic, of course, but he in very plain language, he differentiated between what he called diseases of constant nature compared to diseases of variable nature. Okay, and the diseases of constant nature, he said, and he observed, there are very few. It's just there's a small number of those compared to the diseases of variable nature, right? So if we didn't know any better, we would just, as in the health field, we would just be inundated with diseases of variable nature all day long. The pathic diseases. What are the symptoms that the patient is suffering? What is their pathos? That's the root word behind pathic. What is the suffering? And this, as I say, if we didn't know any better, this would seem to be the big deal that we had to pay attention to in healthcare. People have symptoms, they're suffering. We have to find solutions, right? That's the pathic side. But as I say, as Hahnemann said, he identified this very clear scientific distinction between diseases of constant nature and diseases of variable nature. Now, The diseases of constant nature, I'll just give you some of his examples, and there's still examples today. The basic childhood illnesses, the like things like chickenpox and measles, and these primary childhood infections. These are what he referred to, some of examples anyways, of the diseases of constant nature, right? So what that means is, like, if we're coming to a definition of health and disease and medicine, and how we're relating all these things to each other, the disease of constant nature always has the same essential characteristics, right? It's whether that's chickenpox or measles or what have you, um, it is what it is. Like when you have a case of measles, if you experienced enough patience with that, if or just in life in general, if you're not a physician, you've seen that in enough friends and siblings and family members and whatever. It's like what measles is once you've seen it enough. It's like it has this undeniable set of characteristics. Now, the way it expresses itself can vary. That takes us into the pathic side, but the disease itself is non-changing. It has this essential nature. What I said, what Hahnemann called the diseases of constant nature, and there you have them. So you have those childhood infectious diseases. You have other infectious diseases such as influenza and hepatitis. All these kinds of infectious diseases like that. The same thing. Those are diseases of constant nature. So in our tonic pathic distinction, these are some of the examples the between the tonic and pathic. I'll come back around to the pathic in a second and flesh that out a bit more. But I just want to go back to where Hahnemann started. As he clearly distinguished, we have these diseases of constant nature, and he made very clear in his practice, in his writings, in his whole concept of medicine, that when it is a disease of constant nature, it's always priority to treat that first, right? That's your first order of business when it comes to medicine, because this relationship between the tonic and the pathic, the pathic, any pathic disease emerges out of a tonic disease. It's like we would never say that, oh, look at that tree, it doesn't have any roots or trunk, it's just all branches and leaves. There'd be no such thing. You can't have the branches and leaves before you have the roots and the trunk, right? So I'm just using that as an analogy. Think of it that way. The diseases of constant nature are the roots and the trunk, so to speak. And so any pathic disease you have, by definition, has to have come out of some kind of tonic disease, some kind of disease of constant nature, as Hahnemann would call it. So that being said, this is why Hahnemann said the first order of business is to identify and treat the diseases of constant nature. And one of the reasons being, like, aside from it being the root disease, as I'm saying, it will very much of the time, it will at the same time, it will eliminate any pathic disease that's grown up out of that tonic, right? It will, so whatever the patient is suffering and the pain in their elbow, that example I gave, rather than rushing in to give relief to the elbow, of course, we want to do that ultimately, but by treating that tonic disease, a large number of cases, that's going to take care of the pathic at the same time. So Hahnemann was quite wise and practical in doing this. He wasn't just trying to make up a rule for no good reason. There was a very good reason. So yeah, so the tonic diseases, or the diseases of constant nature, they they're the first order of business. Like in mathematics, we talk about the order of operations. You do the addition and subtraction before the multiplication, and I forget all the order, but we all learned that in grade school. So it's just like that. It's the order of operations. You start with the tonic disease, and whatever pathic expression remains after that, yeah, then you go full force into that. Then you give the homeopathic remedy for the elbow pain or whatever it is. But it'll be that at that stage, that pathic treatment will be a lot easier and a lot more effective than it is, in the flipped model, where the whole world of classical homeopathy, they only treat the pathic side. They only look at that side, Well, other than by accident. I can get into some other examples, but yeah, it's kind of this grand blind spot in classical homeopathy where they go full force into the pathic, and they basically cause a lot of delays, a lot of problems in treatment. They get some successes, but actually relatively few. And if you ask any um, full out practitioner of classical homeopathy, at best, they'll admit to a 10 to 15% success rate. And that's not because the law of similars doesn't work. That's because this exclusive focus on the pathic disease, the symptom picture, is not the best route to go. Like as Hahnemann pointed out, you start with the tonic, you start with the root cause. That will take care of a lot of the pathics. Whatever pathic is left over, you can come back around and treat that. So I just wanted to give this basic orientation. As I say, it's very historically grounded all the way back to Dr. Hahnemann. We have just kind of enhanced our understanding of that. So we haven't invented any new concepts here. We've just taken what Hahnemann gave and fleshed that out into a more specific protocol, right? But as I say, it doesn't contradict his principles. And yeah, this really is the kind of the long and the short of it. We're dealing with the root cause of disease versus the pathic. And I'm saying this, for every new patient, this is critical. This plays into how the treatment goes, how we assess them, how we, assess the remedies and what happens from a remedy. Does somebody have a healing reaction, and does this and that happen? Like the whole business, the whole treatment protocol is based on this distinction. So yeah, I've talked about Hahnemann, and his language started with constant versus variable disease. We've just kind of gotten a little more technical with that. As I say, we call that the tonic and the pathic, or the remedies then become the homotonic versus the homeopathic. And another just general thing to say, I've kind of hinted at this in one way, but any times a patient has a pathic disease, a symptom expression, by definition, there will be a root tonic disease underneath that. Now, we may not necessarily know what it is, or be able to identify it, in the process of diagnosis, at least at a given moment in the treatment. So sometimes all we have is the pathic picture. So we will start with that. But yeah, as soon as possible, as soon as we can see and identify that tonic disease, well, perfect. That's the most immediate thing we want to do. And also, just to clarify as well, when we know both, we can clearly see the tonic disease and the pathic disease. We can give a remedy for each at the same time. They can work together. They kind of work very synergistically. In fact, it kind of enhances the effects of either side of that treatment. But if you only have one side and it's the tonic, that's great. If you only have one side and it's the pathic, that's also good. We go with that. But again, always keeping keeping on the lookout for when we can more clearly find what that tonic disease is, the root cause, and treat that as well. So that's kind of a big overview here. And something I just mentioned as well a moment ago, the idea of a healing reaction. I've done many videos on the topic of the healing reaction. You can look those up on our website. That's a perennial topic. People are always taking their remedies and dealing with their healing reactions and their detox process and all of that. I don't want to go into all of that here, but just in our context here, on the difference between the tonic and the pathic, there is a difference between both of them in the nature of what kind of healing reaction you'll have. So in the pathic, when you give the remedy for that, there isn't much of a healing reaction, typically speaking. Versus on the tonic side, especially when we're getting, in tonic, we're usually getting into more deeply rooted diseases, in terms of somebody's timeline of shocks and traumas, that those may have happened years or decades ago. In the case of the chronic miasms, those genetic inherited diseases, we're talking about some very, very deeply rooted diseases. So yes, we want to identify those and treat them as early as possible in the treatment process, get at those root diseases, those tonic diseases. But because of how deep they are, and how much time typically they've had to kind of embed themselves into the whole physiology of the person, those healing reactions can tend to be bigger, more dramatic, more detox, more discharges. So we have a lot more, more case management to deal with there to make sure the patient has all the proper support for that discharge to happen in as smooth and as easy a way as possible. So I just want to point this out. I had mentioned the healing reaction, and in our context here of tonic versus pathic, this is the reason why we can have more significant healing reactions on this side. Now, I know a lot of, myself included, people don't really appreciate the healing reaction at the subjective human level, right? There, it's, we're uncomfortable, we're, maybe in bed for a day or whatever the case is. We're not functioning at 100%, during that healing reaction, but that's fine. As I say, I don't like it as far as my experience of it, but we all like it in the sense of what it means. Like, we all like this deeper idea of clearing this deeper tonic disease, and permanently getting that out of our system, where it's no longer plaguing our life force, no longer plaguing our life functions, right? So once you understand the idea of it, then it's like, okay, you practically deal with the healing reaction and make sure you're properly supported and all your drainage channels and all the rest of it. But as I say, for all the reasons I'm saying, it's actually, it's experience that we want to have. Like, we don't want the experience, we want the results of it, meaning we want to get rid of those tonic diseases, because they are enemy number one when it comes to our full state of health. So that's, I just wanted to tie a little point around that, of the difference in the types of healing reactions, why it's different between the tonic and the pathic, and why, in the long run, that's actually a good thing. We want those tonic disease healing reactions, because that means we've now gotten rid of one of these fundamental diseases to our whole structure. So that's about all I would say. As I said at the beginning, if you're watching live, certainly put in your questions, and we can expand on any of these points. But I just wanted to lay out that basic framework. And likewise, as well, as I said, if you're watching this as a video replay, same thing, put your comment or question there, and I will take that up in our ongoing series and our ongoing discussion here. So I'll just leave the channel open for the moment. And likewise, as I say, we're talking about tonic and pathic, but if you have any other questions, other parts of treatment, other concepts, and the philosophy of Heilkunst, I know a lot of people really start to get really excited and interested in all the philosophical concepts, because it's not just about health, but it really speaks to a lot of the broader meaning of life and how we relate to ourselves and the world, and how we make our way through the bigger questions of life. We can certainly get into any of those kinds of questions, but yeah, Heilkunst and the medicine is always a good starting point. But as I say, I'll leave the channel open here for a moment if someone is in the middle of typing their question, and we'll kind of come back around to that. But yeah, otherwise, that's kind of the core topic I wanted to start with today. And yeah, as I say, I can't think of any final point I have about that. I think that's a pretty good overview. But as I say, any of the details, and I don't believe there are any questions coming through at the moment. So I will bring this to a close. And again, I will see you again at the next broadcast. In Happy New Year, by the way. I'm actually starting a new rhythm. I'm planning to keep this time of the week, midday on Thursday, every week, to go through whatever the current questions are, whatever the latest questions that have come my way. And we can also, turn it into a conversation. If anyone wants to come on camera with me, we can have a back and forth conversation on a more detailed or complex topic. That's available as well. But for now, I will wish you all a good rest of your day, and I will see you at the next broadcast.